Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's webinar presentation with JC Coated Construction Consultants in partnership with AIA Florida. And this afternoon, we have a 1-hour presentation set up for you here on the 8th edition 2023 Florida Building Code Residential Volume. And we're going to look at the changes to the mechanical, plumbing, and fuel gas provisions. All right, first thing to show you, of course, is your credits across here for AIA, Health, Safety, and Welfare Credit available. And my name is John Farinelli, and I will be your instructor for this presentation. We'll start with Mechanical, Chapter 13, General Mechanical Requirements. Now, as you can see here, this section, M1307.2, Anchorage of Appliances, has been struck in its entirety. And the reason for that is because in all the 8th edition Florida codes, all references to seismic provisions and snow load have been completely deleted. This is gone, and it has been replaced with a very, very simple provision: anchorage of appliances. Appliances designed to be fixed in position should be fastened or anchored in an approved manner. And of course, really what we're talking about here is it has to be secured for wind load. And always keep in mind too that if you are in a flood hazard area, that condensing unit is going to have to be elevated to at or above the base flood elevation. And in our codes, it is base flood plus a foot. Next up is a new section, M1307.7, prohibited support. Gypsum board shall not be used as a support base under an appliance. That can be a little bit confusing, because really what they're talking about here is it's just you can't use gypsum board in and of itself. There has to be some sort of framing. And of course, that doesn't mean that you can't have gypsum board in a mechanical closet. You absolutely can. It just can't be used by its lonesome, if you will, as a support base. That takes care of 13. Let's go to 14 now, heating and cooling equipment and appliances. This section was revised and relocated, and really all they did was make one editorial change to one word, besides bumping up the code section because of that new section you just saw. Appliances, equipment, and installation in pans. Where appliances, equipment, or installation are subject to water damage when auxiliary drain pans fill, that portion of the appliances, equipment, and installation shall be installed above the flood level rim of the pan. Supports located inside of the pan to support the appliance or equipment shall be water resistant and approved. And that was it. Now, we do have a minor issue here. Could call it a problem, if you will. What I'm showing you here in the blue is the section out of the 8th edition code. In the black, this is the 7th edition of the code. And as you can see here with the underline in red, that is the only thing they changed, that one word. However, here's the issue. Both sections are included in the 8th edition of the residential code. And this was just an error. You know, no matter how hard we try to get the code tight, eliminate the conflicts, the glitches, and so on, it's just too much of a challenge in a lot of cases, and things get missed. People are only human. And that's why we go through a glitch amendment process, and we're currently working on glitch number 5, I believe. And of course, if you want to look at those glitch amendments, if you will, the supplements, you have to go to the Building Commission website. All right, let's see. Looks like I've already got a question coming in here. No, guess not. That was a thank you, Wendy. Okay. All right, next up, we have a new section, and this is probably a pretty good change here. This is new section M1411.9, support of refrigerant piping. Refrigerant piping and tubing shall be securely fastened to a permanent support within 6 feet of the condensing unit. And of course, prior to this change in the code, there really wasn't anything in there that talked about fastening and securing the line set within a certain distance of the condensing unit. It just wasn't there. So now we do have provisions within 6 feet. All right, that takes care of 14. Moving now to 15, and we're going to talk about exhaust systems. Now, we're going to talk a little bit here about closed dryer exhaust. This is a minor change, but one of pretty good significance, I would say. M1502.3 duct termination. Exhaust ducts shall terminate on the outside of the building. Exhaust duct termination shall be in accordance with the dryer manufacturer's installation instructions. If the manufacturer's instructions do not specify a termination location, the exhaust duct shall terminate not less than 3 feet in any direction from openings into the building, including openings in ventilated soffits. Exhaust duct termination shall be equipped with a backdraft damper. Screen shall not be installed at the duct termination. This was always the intent of the code. Gotta have 3 feet if the manufacturer's specs do not specify anything else. Now, if the duct termination is coming through the wall, okay, fine. Not really that big of a deal. But in a lot of cases, when the closed dryer is not installed adjacent to an exterior wall, the contractor will take the duct and run it vertical up into the attic, horizontal, and terminate it out the soffit. Well, if you've got a continuously ventilated soffit, or even the old-fashioned, I hate to use that word, stucco soffit or plywood soffit that has the soffit vents every so many feet, either case, you're going to need 3 feet of solid material on either side of that duct termination coming through that soffit. And again, that's always been the intent of the code, because when it's installed adjacent to those ventilated soffits, you can get backdraft problems right back up into the attic with that warm, moist, humid air. All right. Next up is a new section dealing with booster fans, M1502.4.8. Booster fans prohibited. Domestic booster fans shall not be installed in dryer exhaust systems. Now, note that the word domestic is not a defined term in the residential code. However, it is interpreted to mean residential. Now, that said, there's something else we need to get into here, because here it's talking about prohibiting booster fans. But there's another section in the mechanical provisions of the residential code that deals with power ventilators. Here is M1502.4.4, dryer exhaust duct power ventilators. Domestic dryer exhaust duct power ventilators shall conform to UL 705 for use in dryer exhaust duct systems. The dryer exhaust duct power ventilator shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Now, let's take a look at this a little bit further, because now we have a provision in the fuel gas code that's same deal. It's titled Dryer Exhaust Duct Power Ventilators. Domestic dryer exhaust duct power venters, again listed and labeled to UL 705 for use in dryer exhaust duct systems. Dryer exhaust duct power ventilators shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So, new prohibition in the code prohibiting the use of domestic power boost ventilators. But here we have power ventilators. What's the difference? And there is a difference. Dryer exhaust duct power ventilators have metal housings, not plastic, and have some sort of indicator or alarm telling you if the fan is not working or plugged. And the instructions may also give specifics about where it could be placed in the system. And so that is pretty much the way it is. Up here in the plastic, we have a booster that is prohibited by the code, but a power ventilator, absolutely acceptable. Listed per UL. Here's a good shot at the indicator panel, and so on. So there is a difference. One is acceptable and the other isn't. All right. Let's see. No questions at this point, so we will continue. Next, we have table M 1507.4, minimum required local exhaust rates for 1 and 2 family dwellings. They've added a new footnote here. A, the listed exhaust rate for bathrooms, toilet rooms shall equal or exceed the exhaust rate at a minimum static pressure of 0.25-inch water column. So no technical changes to the table itself. Kitchens, it's still 100 CFM intermittent or 25 CFM continuous. Bathrooms, toilet rooms, mechanical exhaust capacity of 50 CFM intermittent or 20 CFM continuous. And this new footnote is applicable to the entire table. And it ties into a provision in the code. And I want to say it was a change in the code back in the 6th edition, where bathroom exhaust fans have to be listed and labeled for the CFM rate. Because we found over testing in time that in a lot of cases, those bathroom exhaust fans would have a stated CFM capacity, but it wasn't even close when they actually tested it. So bathroom exhaust fans now listed and labeled. All right, that takes care of 15, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and move now to 16 and talk about duct systems. This section has been revised. It is M 1601.1.1.1, above ground duct systems. Above ground duct systems shall conform to the following. Now, there were no changes to items 1 through 6, but 7 was revised, specifically item 7.4. Stud wall cavities in the spaces between solid floor joists to be used as air plenum shall comply with the following conditions. And there's 7.4. Stud wall cavities and joist space plenum shall be isolated from adjacent concealed spaces by tight-fitting fire blocking in accordance with section R302.11. New language. Fire blocking materials used for isolation shall comply with section R302.11.1. And when you go there, that's when you get the prescriptive provisions for materials that can be used as fire blocking. Nominal lumber, plywood, and so on. It's been in the code far back as I can remember. But I do have a major problem with this section in and of itself, and I have had the problem for many, many years. Anybody want to venture a guess where I'm going with this? Any thoughts? Why this is a problem about using stud wall cavities and joist space plenums? Any thoughts? Okay, well, here's the deal. Take a look at the energy code. R403.3.5, building cavities, mandatory. Building framing cavities shall not be used as ducts or plenums. That's been in the energy code as far back as I can remember. You cannot use stud cavities and things like that as ducts or plenum spaces. At a minimum, if you wanted to do that, you'd have to have a liner in it, something that could be classified as a duct. And that's been in the energy code again as far back as I can remember. All right, good enough. That takes care of 16. Let's move now, and we shall go to 18, chimneys and vents. Now, the first addition, new section to the code, is something that it's probably a good change, but in the same token, I don't think you're ever going to see it. because we do not, as a rule, have many fuel oil fired appliances here in the great state of Florida. Here's the new section, M 1802.4, blocked vent switch. Oil-fired appliances shall be equipped with a device that will stop burner operation in the event that the venting system is obstructed. Such device shall have a manual reset and shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And again, it's all about oil-fired appliances. And as I said, it's probably a good change to the code here. Okay. But again, when's the last time you saw an oil-fired appliances? These vent switches aren't really new, but the code has not really required them until now. And again, it's more of an up north thing where you have a masonry chimney and fuel oil appliances venting into that chimney, okay, or a type L vent. Now, the venting system on these appliances are subject to blockage by plant debris, animal nesting materials, bird and raccoon carcasses, and even deteriorated masonry. Now, that blocked vent switch, what it's going to do is detect spillage from the venting system, okay? And that's usually going to come from the draft regulator, which is installed between the appliance and the vent or the chimney. And it's going to shut off the appliance. And the whole idea is to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning in the event of an obstructed vent or chimney. And of course, the reason for the manual reset, it prevents the appliance from operating again until it's been properly serviced. But again, I think enough said. When's the last time you saw an oil-fired appliance? All right. Now, here we've had a revision in that the provisions for ground source heat pump loop piping, those systems that were in section M 2105, they've been duplicated in section M 2101 to apply to all hydronic piping systems. It's going to run from M 2101.11 through M 2101.31. In the 7th edition of the code, it ended at 2101.10. So all they did was take it and duplicate it. All right, that takes care of the mechanical provisions, folks. It is time now to move on to plumbing. But before we do, let me check some questions here. And Rick is asking, is a blocked switch also in place for gas-fired appliances? No, that section was just added there for oil-fired appliances. For whatever reason, the gas provisions, haven't seen anything there about that. Good question. Thank you for that. All right, let's go to plumbing now, chapters 25 to 33. First thing they did is add a new provision in here for air vacuum testing for your plastic piping, drainage, waste, and vent systems. P 2503.5.1, rough plumbing. DWV systems shall be tested on completion of the rough piping installation by water, air for piping systems other than plastic, or by a vacuum of air for plastic piping systems, without evidence of leakage. Either test shall be applied to the drainage system in its entirety or in sections after rough-end piping has been installed as followed. No changes to number 1 here, the water test. Each section shall be filled with water to a point not less than 5 feet above the highest fitting connection in that section, or to the highest point in the completed system. Water shall be held in the section under test for a period of 5 minutes, and the system shall prove leak-free by visual inspection. And then here's the air test, no change there. Portion under test shall be maintained at a gauge pressure of 5 pounds per square inch, or 10 inches of mercury column. Pressure shall be held without introduction of additional air for a period of 15 minutes. And here's the new number 3, vacuum test. The portion under test shall be evacuated of air by a vacuum type pump to achieve a uniform gauge pressure of negative 5 psi or a negative 10 inches of mercury column. Pressure shall be held without the removal of additional air for a period of 15 minutes. And as you can see, for the positive pressure test at 5 pounds, negative pressure test is -5. So it's just one, pump it up with air, or evacuated of air, either one. But you still have to go 5 feet above the highest point of the system. So if we're doing a ground rough below the slab, 5 feet, either a water test or a vacuum test. And then once the system is completed, 5 feet, the uppermost 5 feet. All right. Now, the next section here, 2708.4 shower control valves. With this change, the code now addresses field adjustment and access to shower control valves. And lower flow shower heads need to be compatible with the shower control mixing valve. Not really sure how realistic this is as the shower heads are changed out left, right, and center. You know, some people move into a new home and the first thing they do is change out the shower head. So, but that said, here's the new sections. P 2708.4 shower control valves. Individual shower and tub shower combination valves shall be balanced pressure, thermostatic, or combination balanced pressure thermostatic valves that conform to the requirements of ASSE 1016, so on and so forth. Shower control valves shall be rated for the flow rate of the installed shower head. Such valves shall be installed at the point of use. Shower and tub combination valves required by this section shall be equipped with a means to limit the maximum setting of the valve to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which shall be field adjusted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions to provide water at a temperature not to exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Inline thermostatic valves shall not be utilized for compliance with this section. Well, again, most of the valves you see out there, the thermostatic mixing valves, they're set at the factory not to exceed 120 degrees. There's really nothing about adjusting them in the field. However, there are some valves out there that are still field adjustable. But again, the thing in my mind that I think is going to end up being an issue is that the valve flow rate is matched the flow rate of the shower head, because they just get changed out too often. Too often. So we'll see how that one works out. Now, the next thing they did is similar in P 2713.3, bathtub and whirlpool bathtub valves. Bathtub and whirlpool bathtub valves shall have or be supplied by a water temperature limiting device that again conforms to ASSE 1070 and another host of reference standards, except where such combination valves are in accordance with P 2708.4. The water temperature limiting device required by this section shall be equipped with a means to limit the maximum setting of the device, again to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and, where adjustable, shall be field adjusted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions to provide hot water at a temperature not to exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Access shall be provided to water temperature limiting devices that conform to ASSE 1070, and so on. Now, you have an exception in here. Access is not required for non-adjustable temperature limiting devices that conform to ASSE 1070 and so on, and are integral with a fixture fitting, provided that the fixture fitting itself can be accessed for replacement. And that is generally what we always see. You know, it is the fixture fitting itself, you know, the faucet or the valve, if you will. Now, some people have asked, what is the deal with the valve matching the shower head? Well, they actually put it in there for a reason. because the residential code requires a shower head flow rate not greater than 2.5 GPM gallons per minute. And shower controls, the mixing valves, complying with the requirements of the product standards in the code, are designed to safely operate at that flow. However, there are many different types of shower heads available, as we all know, in the market that have lower flow rates. And these lower flow rates might not provide enough motive power within a mixing valve to allow for the valve to self-adjust to prevent temperature shock to the user when a supply pressure or temperature change occurs. Not all shower controls, the mixing valves, are designed and tested to accommodate lower than 2.5 GPM flows. So that section 2708.4 now specifically requires shower control valves to be rated for the flow rate of the installed shower head to provide the scald and thermal shock protection required by the recognized standards. And for bathtubs and whirlpool baths, excuse me, the code also stipulates that access must be provided to water temperature limiting devices for field adjustment, unless they are non-adjustable water temperature limiting devices. And again, I clearly, completely understand why they put this into the code, but how realistic it is, I am not really sure. Because again, I mean, think about what you've done when you bought a new home or rented a new place or whatever. One of the first things people do in a lot of cases is change out that shower head. So again, I understand. I'm just not sure how realistic it is. All right. Let's see. Let me check real quick here, just for giggles, more than anything else. Have got any questions? Nope, no questions at this point, so we will move on. Next up, P 2912.1.1, alternate compliance path. Systems for non-potable uses that comply with the CSA B 805 ICC 805 are deemed to comply with section P 2912. Now, first off, section P 2912 is non-potable rainwater collection and distribution systems. However, during supplement number 1, this section of the residential code was deleted by the building commission. This went into effect April 16, 2024. So this is gone. You cannot use the alternate compliance path. It remains in the plumbing code volume, but it was removed from the plumbing provisions of the residential code. All right. Next up, new section here. Excuse me. P 3005.2.10.1, clean out equivalent. A fixture trap or a fixture with an integral trap removable without altering concealed piping shall be acceptable as a cleanout equivalent. And this is just put in there just to clarify that you can use the trap as a cleanup. The code has allowed that for quite some time. And we've all seen what certain things happen out there with different kinds of traps and so on and so forth. And, you can't make stuff like this up. People actually do it. Don't look to me like those traps are going to function as intended. All right. Now, as we said, removable traps and removable fixtures with integral traps, such as water closets, they have long been considered as acceptable access to the drainage system for clearing stoppages. So that new section P 3005.2.10.1, it merely verifies acceptance of those practices. Now, there is an existing exception to section P 3005.2.5, exception number 1, which only allows cleanout access through a removable P-trap for the same or one size larger pipe size. And section P 3005.2.3 prohibits removal of a water closet to serve as a clean out access to a building sewer. All right. Now, when the code first was printed, these relining provisions of the code were kind of craziness. So during the summary periods, if you will, the supplement periods, they made some changes here. This is P 3011.1 through 3011.10. First thing they did was retitle it Relining of Building Sewers and Building Drains. The general charging section, P 3011.1. This section shall govern the relining of existing building sewer and building drainage piping. And then applicability, P 3011.2. The relining of existing building sewer piping and building drainage piping shall be limited to gravity drainage piping 4 inches in diameter and larger. The relining pipe shall be of the same nominal size as the existing pipe. And really all the code is trying to do here is recognize the various available technologies for relining of existing building and sewer pipe and drainage piping and so on. Now, of course, as we said, when this first came out, there were some problems with it because of the particular ASTM standards that were referenced. And that was addressed during the supplement period, and they made a few changes. Now, that said, one of the changes made was the form and fold method of pipe relining. And it's been used for years. It is a pretty common method these days. You know, it reduces or eliminates the need for open trench excavations. And the code previously recognized relining of underground building sewers by the PVC fold and form method. You know, they take a factory-made extruded thermoplastic folded liner. It's pulled into a cleaned existing pipe, expanded with air and steam. You know, steam for softening the liner to allow unfolding, and then allowed to cool using air pressure only to form a new pipe within the existing pipe. And there are other technologies currently available to reline a piping system, which are approved. They are referenced to ASTM standards. So keep an eye on how these work out, because again, there were changes made during the supplement cycle. And here is one of them. This is where they cleaned up the ASTM standards. P 3012, rehabilitation of building sewers and building drains. P 3012.1, cured in place. Cured in place rehabilitation of building sewers and building drainage piping shall be in accordance with ASTM F 1216 or ASTM F 1743. And again, this was added during supplement number 1. The whole deal with this is, as you saw, the fold and form method, piping 4 inches and larger. With these cured in place methods under these two ASTM standards, you can reline a pipe as small as 2 inches. So different animals, really, when you think about it. But this cures the problem that was in the code as it was originally printed. All right. All right, Francisco is asking, are you aware of a workaround for the 12-inch maximum separation requirement for a P-trap? Let's see. We have a job with a 32-inch stick transfer slab that wouldn't comply. High-rise condo. No, Francisco, I'm afraid I can't help you with that, my friend. I can't help you with that. You're going to need to get with your plumbing contractor and probably the code official for the authority having jurisdiction. Nothing I can do to help you with that, my friend. All right. that takes care of that. Let's go ahead and go to fuel gas now, and we'll talk about chapters 12 through 23. First thing they did is give us a new definition of a copper alloy. A homogeneous mixture of not less than two metals, where not less than 50% of the finished metal is copper. Now, this is a follow-up to what's been happening in the last couple of code cycles. For, oh gosh, I don't know how far back, the codes have always talked about brass, 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 brass. Well, in essence, there are many, many different types of brasses, red brass, yellow brass, and so on. So the code has slowly but surely gotten away from the word brass, and now it's just a copper alloy. Code keeping up with technology, if you will. Next up, we've got some new definitions here to clarify the terms that are used in the definition of point of delivery. And a change to the definition of a service shutoff that coordinates with all of the relevant definitions. Point of delivery. For natural gas systems, the point of delivery is the outlet of the service meter assembly or the outlet of the service regulator or service shutoff valve where a meter is not provided. Where a system shutoff valve is provided after the outlet of the service meter assembly, such valve shall be considered to be downstream of the point of delivery. For undiluted liquefied petroleum gas systems, the point of delivery shall be considered to be the outlet of the service pressure regulator, exclusive of line gas regulators in the system. And that is your new definition. System shutoff valve. And a valve installed after the point of delivery customer piping system to shut off the entire piping system. This is an optional valve right now, the way the code is written. The whole idea is to allow a contractor or the building owner to shut off the gas to the building without having to go to the meter assembly and shutting the gas off there. It wouldn't surprise me if the next code cycle or two that a system shutoff valve becomes mandatory. Right now, it's optional. And then along those lines, new definition for service meter assembly. The meter, valve, regulator, piping, fittings, and equipment installed by the service gas supplier before the point of delivery. Now, these new and revised definitions that we've seen here, folks, the intent is to clarify the transition from the gas utility company service to the portion of the gas piping system regulated by the code. The point of delivery is the point where the fuel gas provisions of the code first take effect. Downstream of the point of delivery is governed by the code, and upstream of the point of delivery is governed by the Department of Transportation and the gas utility company. Now, the definition of point of delivery refers to the service meter assembly, but this latter term has not previously really been defined. So this new definition clarifies what components are under the control of the gas utility company and are therefore upstream of the point of delivery and not controlled by the code provisions. Now, the definition of the service shutoff valve was revised to refer to the point of delivery instead of the vague reference to customer piping systems. So that new definition of the service meter assembly includes the meter as one of the several components that are upstream of the point of delivery. Just like that. There's your service meter assembly. Right there's the point of delivery, right after the meter. And then we get that system shut off, which right now is optional, going into the building. All right, let's go now to section G 2414, and we'll talk a little bit here about piping materials. Here is a revised section. It is now G 2414.8.3. Threaded joint sealing. Threaded joints shall be made using a thread joint sealing material thread joint sealing material shall be non-hardening and shall be resistant to the chemical constituents of the gases to be conducted through the piping. Thread joint sealing materials shall be compatible with the pipe and fitting materials on which the sealing materials are used. Now, this section here was revised, frankly, to require the use of thread joint sealants, joint compounds, pipe tape, whatever. Now, the code previously addressed pipe thread compounds, stating that when used, they would resist any chemical constituents of the gas. But until now, the code has not required the use of thread sealants on threaded joints. And, the whole point of using a thread sealant, it's mainly a lubricant to allow the threads to make up tight to form a metal-to-metal seal. And any imperfections or voids in the threads are filled in by the thread sealant material. And the most common thread sealants used these days, paste made with Teflon and Teflon tape, really. But basically what you've got to look at is what type of fittings and piping are you using? And is the sealant compatible? Because the code doesn't spec anything else. It just says that you will use a thread sealing compound. So the installing contractor is going to have to take a look at the manufacturer's specs on that joint thread material and make sure that it's compatible with the type of piping. All right. Let's go now to 2415 piping system installation. They made a change here just to correct an omission in the code, an omission. This is G2415.5, fittings in concealed locations. Fittings installed in concealed locations shall be limited to the following types. And as you can see here, the change in number 1, threaded elbows, tees, couplings, plugs and caps. No changes to 2 brace fittings, 3 welded fittings, or these fittings listed to the ANSI LC1 or the LC4. Some of these press connect fittings now you can use in gas systems that exceed 5 PSI. And again, this was just a correction into the code. Everything else that you see here is all threaded, right? Well, plugs and caps are threaded. So there's really no reason to exclude them. So again, just making a correction in the code, correcting an omission. All right, let's go now to G2427, venting of appliances. What they've done here is deleted an exception, okay? And again, I don't see this as really being a big issue in Florida because we don't really use masonry chimneys for the venting of appliances. This is G2427.5.5.1. Now, before we move forward here, I've got to ask this question. Does everybody see this number in parentheses 503.5.6.1? Can you tell me what's going on with this? Why is this listed in parentheses adjacent to the code section that's in the gas provisions of the residential code? Anybody tell me that? Anybody? Yes, no? Because you see this quite a bit throughout the fuel gas provisions. Okay, Pat and Donna, you're close. You're close. What this means is the fuel gas volume. Yep, the fuel gas volume. So whenever you see an additional set of code numbers, section numbers, it's the same section. Residential, fuel gas, same deal. All right, in any event, chimney lining, chimneys shall be aligned in accordance with NFP 211. And then the exception, where an existing chimney complies, continued use is allowed. Will the appliance vented by such chimney is replaced by an appliance of similar type, input rating, and efficiency? Well, the exception's gone. But again, this is not something that we really see in Florida because we do not see a lot of appliances vented into a masonry chimney. Now, the exception to the chimney lining provisions previously allowed, as you saw, an existing unlined chimney to continue to be used when replacing the appliance vented by the chimney. The exception stipulated that the replacement appliance had to be similar in type, BTU and hour input rating, and thermal efficiency. And the code is otherwise required a replacement appliance to comply with the provisions for a new appliance installation, including the venting. Now, the exception applied to all appliances. For example, a replacement water heater installation is required to be served by a code-compliant venting system, just as the initial water heater was. However, the exception allowed a non-compliant chimney to serve a new water heater installation, which is in conflict with a basic principle of the code. The appliance installation instructions and the appliance listing. Now, the original purpose of the exception was to remove a potential hardship caused by requiring an old unlined existing chimney to be lined when the water heater had to be replaced. The exception was based on the assumption that the previous water heater was venting properly and the existing unlined chimney was in serviceable condition. But because newer appliances changed design, input ratings, and efficiency, it is really unlikely that a replacement appliance will be similar to the previous appliance. So, serviceable unlined chimneys, well, they're also unusable. So, in essence, the exception was considered outdated and unnecessary. And so they just deleted in its entirety. Gone. All right. Next up, we have G2429 closed dryer exhaust. Now, this is one of the most interesting changes in the fuel gas provisions of the residential code. Take a look at this. This is new. G2429.5.1, closet installation. Where a closet is designed for the installation of a clothes dryer, an opening having an area of not less than 100 square inches for makeup air shall be provided in the closet enclosure, or makeup air shall be provided by other approved means. Now let's talk about this, okay? You got to go back to another code section, which is G2439.5. That section requires all clothes dryers exhausting greater than 200 CFM to be provided with a makeup air supply because of the concern for creating negative pressure in the space and starving the dryer for airflow. That requirement is separate from the requirement for providing an opening in a closet enclosure that contains dryers. Now, previous code, both of these provisions were included in one section, and that was somewhat confusing. So they separated it out. So we still have the provision in there for a clothes dryer, no matter where it's installed. I don't care if it's in the center of the room. If it exhausts more than 200 CFM, you have to provide it with makeup air. However, under this new section, it applies to all gas-fired clothes dryers, regardless of the CFM capacity. If it's installed in a laundry closet, you've got to provide 100 square inches of free area. And remember, just because you have an opening here 10 by 10 and it's covered with a louver or a grill, that doesn't give you 100 inches free. You have to make deduction for the blockages, the fins, the vent, and so on, the frame. Now, that said, let's go back. It said other approved means. Because the questions sometimes come up, well, what about louvered doors? Well, if you can show that you have 100 inches free, code official may approve that, but they may not too, because these doors could be changed out. They could put solid doors in here and now you're not going to get anything. So that'll be up to the code official for the authority having jurisdiction. But just remember, it doesn't matter what the CFM capacity of, if it's installed in a closet, you've got to make provisions for makeup air. All right, enough said. This is another interesting change. Exception number 2 has been deleted. This is dealing with cooking appliances. And before I move forward with this, let me just double check, make sure. Nope, no questions. Okay, very well. All right, this is G2447.2, prohibited location. Cooking appliances designed, tested, and listed and labeled for use in commercial occupancies shall not be installed within dwelling units or within any area where domestic cooking operations occur. Well, as you can see, exception number 1 remains. Appliances that are also listed as domestic cooking appliances. And number 2 was struck out, where the installation is designed by a licensed professional engineer in compliance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. All right, why did they delete this? Well, it was considered unnecessary. Yeah. You know, the whole idea with this is, commercial cooking appliances are manufactured to different standards, and they do not incorporate the same safety features as domestic cooking appliances. For example, commercial ranges operate at higher temperatures. They have higher input ratings. They have less insulation to protect the users. They require greater clearances to combustibles. And some of them even require a non-combustible floor. And the commercial ones lack child-safe features, such as the cable to keep the range from tipping over. Adequate ventilation and makeup air also become a concern with the installation of commercial cooking appliances with high-velocity range hoods. So for those reasons, the fuel gas provisions have historically prohibited installation of commercial cooking appliances within dwelling units. Now, going back a couple of code cycles ago, the fuel gas provisions introduced this exception to allow appliances that were listed for both commercial and domestic use. And just every manufacturer out there these days has got dual listed appliances. And we have seen trends in recent years that have seen an increase in some larger homes with the latest in kitchen appliances installed. And that's what they're looking for. Well, again, about 2 code cycles ago, they put this new exception in here about the installation being designed by a licensed professional engineer and design complied with the manufacturer's instruction. Well, that was kind of an error in the first place, okay? For the simple reason that you really couldn't do this, because you look at the manufacturer's specs and they tell you, do not install commercial listed appliances in a residential structure. So there was no way you could comply with the code, even if it was designed by an engineer. And again, every manufacturer out there of any size has got dual listed appliances these days. So there's really no need to have this exception in the code. So they just struck it out altogether. It's gone. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all good things must come to an end. And this concludes our presentation on the changes to the mechanical, plumbing, and fuel gas provisions of the 8th edition Florida Building Code Residential Volume.